Okay, so.
And then you can email the three of them and explain like what is the idea, when do you want, and then they can connect and schedule the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you all can see my presentation, right? Okay.
Yes, correct.
So we will wait around like 2 or 3 minutes for everyone to join this webinar. Okay. Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, you can just reply to that last email and then just copy both Teresa and Charles and just say like, hey, we already got the approval, or they're interested to join, and you can schedule with them directly. Thanks, bye. Okay, thanks, bye.
So hello everyone. So welcome to our episode 3 of Employee Experience Monthly Global Expert Chat. I still think this is a long name, but it's really easily for everyone to enjoy what we're trying to do and what we are trying to deliver. So today we have Miss Liz Burow, join us from the US. So for those who don't know, but I'm sure that everyone knows about her already because I saw a lot of big names that already registered for this webinar. So Liz Burow is the founder of Thinky Space, an insight and innovation practice, and has been working closely with Fortune 100 companies on their futures of work strategy, hybrid toolkits, and return to workplace pilot programs. So hi, Liz. Oh, what's her? Yeah, but okay. So in the meantime, like when we wait to welcome her back, I think it's a little bit have the technical problems here, but okay, we still have one more in the rooms right now. Is that Mr. Jeremy Mostrop, CEO of Pangean, the all-in-one. Oh, hello, Liz. Okay. Okay, hello, Liz. Welcome back.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. I'm just introduce you so you can say hi to others.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for joining today.
Yeah. So thank you, Liz. And as I say, yes, we still have another one in the room right now. This is Mr. Jeremy Mostrop, the CEO of Pangean, the all-in-one, I have to emphasize this, the all-in-one workplace sensing platform that helps the leadership improve how people work in the office. So it's 6 a.m. in California right now. Yeah, it's very early. Thank you so much for joining this. Can you say hi to our audience?
Hello, everybody. It's great to be here.
Okay, so when we mention the workplace experience, I cannot ignore DreamBlack's upcoming projects that we call HD, which is Hoàng Diệu, and NUD, which is Nguyễn Ưu Dĩ, that are gonna launch at the end of this year. So we also have Mr. Dan Van Rossum, our Chief Experience Officer, on this call. So Dan, could you introduce a little bit about our upcoming project? And as the topic is people data and the new experience at work, so could you share to us like what kind of data will be used in these new buildings? Okay.
Yeah, sure, Mia, and thank you for the introduction, and obviously thank you hugely to Liz and Jeremy for joining in their respective time zones, which I know is late here, but it's very early there. But really appreciate having you guys on. Also, thank you for everyone here in Vietnam who's joining at 8 p.m. Hopefully you had a good dinner, and then you're very well nourished for this presentation today. So as Mia shared, would be my great pleasure to introduce the two projects that we're working on, really in relationship to the topic today about people, data, and workplaces. So first of all, we're launching in November this project that we call the unoffice, which is in every way, that's the reason why it's called unoffice, in every way the opposite of a typical office. And the reason that we did that is because we talked a lot to young Vietnamese and we asked them, if you could design your dream office, what would it be like? And I think older people, probably like myself, think that when we talk about young people and dream office, it has to be 100% TikTok and digital screens and all kind of like crazy technology in innovation. But really when we ask, they want something cool, they want something stylish, they want something comfortable. We kept hearing that word comfort. And so that's really what we tried to do in this new office. It will launch in October, November. It will have about 800 workspaces. So we have a lot of people that can enjoy this building. And then the interesting part from like the data perspective is some of the things that we're launching here for the first time, which is that I think buildings now can talk to people more. So I think previously, and I'm sure Liz will talk about this as well, that our interactions with buildings was very much like one way because the building was designed to what the building wants, and then you kind of have to just live within it. But now it becomes much more of a conversation between the person who is occupying the building, the person who's using the building, and the building. So we're thinking about collecting this kind of data about what's happening in the building, and therefore we can create kind of like meaningful data visualizations, this sense of liveliness. But also in every other aspect, this office is very much designed around the idea of letting people choose how they want to work, and kind of like constantly collecting information and data on what spaces are being used and what spaces are not being used and in which function, and therefore we can constantly optimize. So you see, for example, in this big ground floor where maybe previously we would have built a lot of walls and separate rooms and functions, but now it's really very highly configurable. Even the digital screen moves up and down and left and right to create the opportunity to collect data, to see how people use the space and then optimize from there. So we're very excited, and really I'm here today to learn more about how we can do that even better. And we're pre-construction, so we can still apply some of the learnings that we're going to get from Liz and Jeremy today. And then the second project out of 3 new locations we're launching this year is a project called The Campus, which for people based in Saigon will know, there's an old port area right around, kind of like right across the bridge from District 1 on the way to District 7. And we have the opportunity there to rebuild an old warehouse, but make it purpose-built for offices. But again, coming back to what we hear from the people who actually spend time in their offices, the employees, they want comfort, they want green, they want natural, they want well-being. So that was very much at the core of this building. But again, going back to the idea of data, and I think data is very linked with choice and how you want to consume a building. Even this building will also be powered by our app, our digital platform that we're also currently building, hopefully also ready around the same time, where you can log in and you can see live like what is available in the building in terms of the kind of spaces you want to work in, but also what events are happening there. You can connect with people in the building. You can actually order your coffee on the way to work, or you can maybe when you're sitting at your desk and you have a lot of work to do, or you have an 8 p.m. webinar to present, then maybe you can actually offer someone in your team, the people you're working with, a cup of coffee from the coffee bar downstairs in this example. And you can also use it to submit maintenance requests or say that certain things aren't working or you need some help from our hospitality team. So again, like combining the building with kind of like platforms like these and making the physical space constantly evolve around what we're learning through those platforms is really one of the ways that we think we can deliver choice. And as we've seen, choice and flexibility and the opportunity to customize and personalize your workplace experience is really at the top of the list when we're talking to young Vietnamese that are using these buildings. So that was my quick sales pitch that Mia allowed me to do. With that said, I'm going to hand it back to her.
Okay, thank you, Dan, for the quick introductions about our upcoming news projects. It's actually, from my point of view, we are so excited to be working from here because I'm one of the target user of the design of this building. So and so welcome back, Liz. So thank you so much for joining us, and it's very soon 8 a.m. I know to see the HR community in Vietnam. So we do appreciate this a lot. So how are you today, Liz? How do you feel right now?
I'm great. Thanks for asking.
So actually I have one question for you. So I would love to hear more from you as Vietnam is now facing another COVID-19 wave. So we're now working from home a lot. Is there any way that we can still bring the experience to our employees, even if they are working from anywhere?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I would say right now, the most important thing to do when we're working remotely is focus on your team culture and making sure that people feel open and safe and able to kind of express what they're feeling. So one of the things that I was doing this past winter with actually the class I was teaching is every week we would ask the students to submit a GIF that represented how they were feeling that week. And it was just a nice way to kind of break the ice. Sometimes they were funny, sometimes they were, dramatic, but a way, like a kind of artifact and a method for opening up and really making sure that we kind of understand where people are.
Okay, really, really great. Because so I will really learn more from your presentation, which I will give you the stage right now. So okay. Yeah, okay, sure.
Okay, let's see. I'm still, I think you have to give me abilities to share. There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And okay, can you guys see that? A nice deep purple.
Yes.
Awesome, great. Well, thank you for having me. I'm going to get started. I call this a maximist deck because there's a lot of content, but I'm always looking for editing skills, but I just have so much to share about the work I've been doing for the last really 12 months. So I'm excited for this opportunity to gather up all my thoughts and materials. And I'm really excited to share the stage today with Jeremy, who I've actually been working with closely for the last 6 months on Pangean. And so I thought it was a really good opportunity to bring him into this conversation today as well. So we're going to talk about really the idea of this moment of inflection where we've been, a lot of the world has been working remotely for the last 12 to 14 months. How can we reconsider the purpose of work, how we work, the purpose of the workplace, and how can we guide that post-pandemic transformation when we have some time to really think about it and work with our teams on the future. The emphasis is on how can we pilot. And so today I'll be talking about, firstly, why should we change? I think there's still some people thinking that maybe we don't need to. How to establish learning goals when you're piloting or trying new ideas. I have 3 stories of change to share, and then tips and takeaways. So before we get started, I just want to say that my work and the work I'm showing today is really rooted in 4 thinking hats. The first is that my approach is human-centered design. So it's really about gaining empathy and listening, and sort of taking a opportunity to say to yourself, I don't know anything. And so my job is to open myself up to listen. The second is a design thinking frame, which is how do we ask, is there a problem? Is there an opportunity? And then challenge ourselves to even reframe that and continue to reframe. The design doing is how fast can we get to piloting and testing and prototyping. And then the last is how do we inform ourselves of what just happened through stories, but also through data. The process is really, you know, a chance to say what's going on, what's up. And it's not just asking ourselves what's wrong, but where are there bright spots? Where are we doing things right? And how can we lean into that and emphasize the positive? Bringing up ideas and insights, and how do you aggregate that into a real statement and a claim? And then getting into the testing, being really rigorous around what did we learn, what are we going to do about it, and then how do we adopt and scale those ideas. So it feels, or it looks linear, but it actually feels like this, which is why this is my logo for my company, Thinky Space, which is really making the space to think more creatively and collaboratively with clients. So it can feel like a maze, it can feel like a rat's nest in the beginning, because if you're really doing it right, you shouldn't know the answer, but you should know that you want to probe and that you want to pursue something new. And then as you learn, you expand your mind and expand the ideas, there's a moment of inflection where you need to start to contract again and make a plan and make a path and feel like you're moving forward successfully. So in the practice I lead, it's really about that mindset of discovery and making sure that everything that we do is co-creative, that we bring the client along, we bring employees along, that we get buy-in and consensus along the way, and that we build momentum through small actions. So the more that we can start doing, we start to show what is possible, and that we're in motion. And that's actually quite significant, because thinking too hard can be detrimental, and silence is, in HR, we know that like silence and a lack of communication can be a real problem. So the first thing I want to say also is that, especially in this moment, before we actually decide to do anything, we need to make sure that we understand how people are feeling. And as I mentioned, this exercise of how are we feeling, and can you put a gift to it? Or can we inspire some thoughts around, you know, can we prompt people to kind of reflect on what is going on in their life right now, is really important. Because one of the things I've learned from the work I've been doing in the last 12 months is that something about remote work, about being really open and honest of what's going on in your life, and checking in with people, it has created more transparency and more visibility and more honesty about who we are, and how we're feeling. And it's actually, for many people, made them feel closer to their teammates and to their colleagues, because we're not putting up walls and guards. We're actually hearing the kids scream in the background. We're talking about the good and the bad. And that is definitely one of the things that a lot of employees I've been talking to have said, I want to carry that transparency and honesty and visibility forward, and make sure we don't lose that when we come back in person. So as I mentioned, one of the first things we need to establish is, why should we change at all? I think the thing to really remember is that if the pandemic was a universally unplanned change in our lives, this moment can be the most transformative planned change that we can go through. But we do need to know that even if our job hasn't changed in our role, life has. So I think we're at sort of like weighing two things of, will we go back to our old habits? Will we act the same way we did pre-pandemic? or really will some of these new habits stick? But what's surprising is McKinsey just published this article and this body of research that was really insightful around interviewing many top CEOs, and a lot of companies don't have a detailed vision in place to think about and to execute on a flexible work experience and a hybrid work experience. And so I think a lot of companies right now are just trying to get the story straight, trying to continue to listen to employees, but take action on what to do next. I think the other question of why change is maybe even if we know that things aren't the same, people don't feel the same, they have new expectations, new ideas can feel scary and they can feel risky, especially maybe not to the mid-manager or the employee, but the leader is just very nervous about changing direction and not sure where to go and how much to listen to the employee and make sure that those ideas are heard. But also, you know, businesses are built on profit and built on loyalty and success. And so we need to make sure that we're listening to needs, but we're also making sure we have top performing teams. But I think one of the things that we need to point out is that lagging companies are the least likely to experiment and iterate on a process. And that's why they're lagging, right? They're too scared, they're risk adverse. But you've got to take some risk in order to innovate and to iterate and to become cutting edge. And so I think it's our job to make sure that that risk feels low and that we can test quickly and in a small way, and then show success or show the parts of the pilot that are positive and continue to scale up. So the other thing, the reason that we need to change, is, I think, is just really focusing on the human experience at work. And because this is geared towards HR professionals, I think it's really important to talk about HR's role in the work experience, but also the workplace experience, and really think about HR as a UX arm. What are the tools and the resources, and what is the employee experience or journey day to day or within the life cycle of a company, and how can we make sure that we map that, but we also evaluate their experience in a story way, but also a data rich way. I think the most important thing is to understand what is the point of the work and what is the purpose of the company and what's the purpose of the workplace, and putting people first and really establishing the goal of the workplace. And for me in my work, and I think across many organizations, a lot of big themes have been discussed this year around people really want a sense of belonging when they come to work. They want to feel trusted and have control and autonomy in how they work, because it's a manager's job is no longer to kind of peer over the shoulder of you, but really to encourage you and coach you and mentor you. And how do we create a sense of equity and inclusion in the conversation? And how are we going to do that when we come back to work and things like technology will stretch that tension further? And then, am I being provided the right resources to do my job most effectively? Because when space or technology works against you, you can feel like this wasn't made for me, and maybe my company isn't considering or cares about what I need. So it's really important to continue to listen to people through surveys, through focus groups, through conversations, through generative workshops, to really understand how we can continue to build on those purposes and goals of the work experience. So we are in this moment where I know Vietnam right now is back in lockdown, and we're sort of fluctuating, and people are being unbelievably agile and flexible in these teams that are trying to build up and prepare for a return to the workplace, or think about a work style which is more distributed and more flexible. But it's really this moment where you should be asking yourself, what can we effectively test? Well, how can we get ready? How can we improve on the experience and make sure that we're communicating that to employees, because they're very nervous right now, is also what I hear from the HR teams that I've been working with. So it's really, this idea of let's listen and learn through conversations with our people. And with our peers. So this is a great example of share what you know, don't hide it under your coat. It's not doing anyone any good. Like we're in a moment where we need to share our experiences. I always think, how do we pilot when no one's around? So I think there's lots of different ways of piloting new and preparing for new styles of work. Brainstorming what it might feel like to be back at work, role playing an experience, and I'll share some of those ideas today. And then what can you do right now? I think definitely one of the things, if you're not already doing it, is playing around and leveraging virtual collaboration tools so that you can do real-time collaboration. You can build artifacts and conversations with platforms like Mural or Miro. I'm working with a client that doesn't have a shared platform for building decks and documents. And I'm thinking to myself, like, that's a huge win if they get that, because it enables flexible work and distributed work in a very significant way. So there's a lot of auditing that you can do about, like, how can we truly be more distributed? But before we get started with the examples, I just want to say, no matter what you're doing, you should take an attitude of what are we trying to learn from the thing we're about to embark on. So if you're really trying to build a new idea or do research, you need to establish learning goals and the why behind the what. So if we're going to redefine the way that we work and the purpose of the workplace and try new ideas without risk, we need to have a plan. And Jeremy's always talking about, what's your plan? I think the first thing before we actually build a plan is to build empathy. And so I always say this, your experience is not everyone's experience. So the goal of a research plan or learning goals is to take a step back and say, I actually don't think I know what's going on. I need to unlearn my assumptions. I need to open my mind up and make sure that I am putting aside my experience and making sure that I can understand everyone else's experience. I use this diagram a lot when I'm starting projects and working with clients, and really asking ourselves, like, can we list out the questions that we're trying to learn about? Like, what is the goal of the workplace? Who is it for? Do we even think do we know who we think is going to come back? What do we do when we work distributedly? Like, what do we do best in a remote world? What do we do best when we're together? And how do we create that sense of belonging in person or remotely? So those learning goals are yours to manifest, but you also need to connect those to who are the benefactors of the work that we're working on and researching for. Is it leadership? Is it the individuals? Is it the working teams? And then what methods are we going to use to get there? So some learning goals may be only for some benefactors using some methods. Some may be universal. And then the last is, like, what action do we think we want to take based on what we're learning? So this can be a really powerful diagram when you're starting a research project. And then also in conjunction with that is the idea of a stakeholder map. So this is really for us the idea of, what are the politics in play? Who is reporting to whom, either directly or who's influencing whom? The CEO often is kind of off in a corner, but really speaking and leading on behalf of the everyday employee. So what is their relationship? How do they communicate with each other? And who is in between, working on behalf of those two individuals? Kind of manifesting what they're actually saying and asking each other is really important as well. And the last is more specific, but I just wanted to show this kind of diagram, which is, like, do you have any metrics that you're playing around with? In my world, it's often two questions, like, did we build the right stuff? Because a lot of my work, I'm trained as an architect, I work in the physical environment, and it's a space conversation. So, like, what new projects, sites, pilots, furniture kits, acoustic lighting, all that, like, physical manifestation of a work culture. But also, is our business thriving? Are our people thriving? So how can we introduce on top of that new modes of working, new flexibility or mobility, work styles and work modes, and the kind of technology and tools that people need. And so, I created this diagram of what are the workplace needs, what were the pre-pandemic metrics that we used to measure these 4 needs, and then what were the indicators of that metric and the method that we use to gather that. And it's really just this idea of like, are there going to be shifts in the metrics that we care about and how we gather that information? As simple as like, in pre-pandemic times, coming into HQ was kind of an opt-out, like I'm not going to. And now it might be like opt-in, like what's going to pull me in. And so how are you going to measure that sentiment and that feeling of why people returned to an HQ? As much as like, we're doing satisfaction through employee surveys, but will there be new methods to passively gather satisfaction or activities at work in the new environment? So I'm going to tell 3 stories about clients I'm working with and the piloting work that they're doing. So the first story is a story of evolution, and this is really working directly with the head of HR and talking about the need for a cultural transformation and really thinking through the idea of what's the risk of doing nothing over something. So, they're sort of came to me and they said, we're about to reopen our doors. What should we tell our employees and what can we start testing tomorrow as we start coming and having expectation of returning to work? So the other specific thing to know about this company is they're very traditional. And so there's a lot of change management and change conversation and getting buy-in and building that business case for things are changing. And we feel like that change and that new expectation will stay. And that the transformation is double. So they're returning to work. But in 2 years, 2 of their large locations will also move into new locations. So it's a double change. So how do we make sure that it feels like a kind of constant story for the employee? We want to make sure that we're building new habits and we're establishing an awareness of the habits that we have so that we can kind of move the needle on new norms, new expectations. We need to define the word flexibility, which I think a lot of people and a lot of organizations are moving through right now. Like tactically, what are those hours? What are those practices, locations, guidelines that we're expecting from teams and individuals? A review of tech. Tech is incredibly powerful and important. We all know that because I'm sitting here with maybe 8 pieces of technology that are allowing me to have this conversation. But we still need to tell that story of investing in technology can transform the work experience for employees. And then modeling that choice. Who can model and be an influencer of change, and how can we do that really quickly? So the first is really this question of, do we really need to convince our company to prioritize people over profit when thinking about the work experience, or people and profit? And sometimes the answer is yeah. So I think we need to kind of get in the mind of those individuals. Like if the buyer or the leader is saying, I want to make sure I'm investing in the right things, was it good? It was a good kind of like return on investment. They're looking at certain measures of success, cost per full-time employee. They're looking at the footprint, the terms, but the user and maybe the head of HR is saying that, but what is the experience, and were our teams fulfilled? Were they engaged? Are they staying? Is there high turnover, low turnover? Are people using their paid time off? Are they recouping? Are people being burnt out? So we need to kind of balance these needs, but we definitely want to communicate that people are at the forefront of solutions, not just low cost and high profit. So in this engagement, which is over a series of months, we're doing a couple of discrete things. The first is working with employees and teams on building new habits and creating voice of the employee focus groups and team accountability. So simple exercises like, where were we and where do we think we're going in terms of assumptions and behavior? So having participants fill this out from their own perspective or their team perspective of where was I coming from, where am I headed, and complementing that with a group, a team, an HR-led effort, which is the FlexWork initiative, informing the experience from the advocacy. Do we continue to have the voice of the employee in our mind as we think about solutions? Is someone, is there a group of people that is really thinking about the management of flexible work and speaking with managers and leaders to make sure that they understand and they're adopting these new ideas? Do we have ways of building a culture that is supported with flexible ways of working? So sometimes you're expected and you build an experience, an event that maybe is about bringing people together in person, but other times you build an event that is specifically for distributed teams. And then how are human resources supporting and communicating and educating on new benefits and new specifics around potential flexibility and mobility. The other thing I think is really important, and I saw people asking about, is the story versus data. And I'm always thinking about this because the first job is to listen and create a bunch of findings. So facts, testimonials, metrics, figures, but you want to aggregate that into something. So a tool called affinity mapping, you start to organize ideas into themes. And then we go through an exercise of building an insight and writing out a script. So it's really this a very simple script of what's the current state, what's the desired future state, the barrier to that ideal state, and a motivation to change. And so you write these paragraphs, and now you have a story, and you complement that with testimonials, data points, and actions that you could take. And so when you're presenting this, you're presenting in themes of people feel, or you could even say Jeremy feels it's hard to transition from home to the office. And this really helps kind of get it out of graphs and bar charts and play to both sides of the brain for your audience as you shop these ideas around, because that's the other more important thing is you're showing this to people and you continue to carry the voice of the employee with you. The other thing that we're doing is team agreement workshops and a flex work pilot program. So on the left are some workshop activities that we're doing with teams and team leaders of really asking them with prompts like, okay, let's be open around what does your team do best in a group in person? What do they do best in a group remotely? What do they do best individually in the office? What do you do best individually virtually? So you can really be specific and intentional and start to develop the why behind the what. We also do abstraction laddering. So you build a statement in the middle and you say flexibility is important. Why? So you try to ratchet up and understand the kind of the higher order meanings behind that. And then how are we going to manifest that below? So you can understand both sides. This is turning into a template that we're executing on in the next coming weeks, where we're sending a template of a team agreement to team leads. We're asking them to run these workshops. We're training them on how to do that. And then they will fill out this form out, which is very basic things like, what's our team dress code? What are we going to come in on certain days together? What are our core working hours? Being respectful of people's home life and commuting times. And they fill that out, they agree on it together, and they send it back to HR so we can comb through it and understand the kind of spectrum of expectations. And we're testing this for the next 4 months. The next one is just the idea of building that story and business case around technology and the value of that. So there is a discussion still of how big of the monitor do we need to give people? Do we need to buy new monitors? The answer is yes. A study, there's plenty of studies around saying that, a second monitor or a larger monitor increases productivity. And I think it's just really kind of being really conscious of, in this day and age, the aesthetic and the materials of the office. It's nice, But as an employee experience, if you're sitting at a nice table, but your technology sucks, you're thinking like, wrong move, wrong spend on behalf of me. But this spreadsheet here, which was done in 2011, I think is incredibly powerful, which is basically saying, at least in American terms, the total value of someone's salary is 5 times the total cost of annually of their work experience. So invest in the person, right? Invest in the person's productivity and preference, not in the stuff itself. That's a low cost compared to the person itself. And the last is really exciting. We're piloting new ideas with leaders. So we're taking head of HR office, head of IT workspace, and modeling change and testing new ideas. So how can we flip a private office into a flex meeting space for the team? How can we introduce new technology, new 360 and more inclusive, better acoustic value speakers and cameras? How can we introduce power packs for laptops so you're not tripping over wires because everyone's going to come back with the laptop they've been using? Everyone's had an amazing, a lot of people have had great hookup at home or wish they did. So how can the new environment that you come back to offer those things? So we're testing these ideas in offices as they return this summer. And it's also sort of like action, right? Like something's changing, we're testing new ideas. So we're gonna ask for people's feedback, thumbs up, thumbs down. So just a summary of that story. We're testing new ideas. We're testing flexible agreements, new technologies, new super days. So these big all hands event days and new dress codes. So the second story is a story of iteration with a large tech company that has offices in Australia and New Zealand. So we're leveraging that because Australia is open and coming and has returned to work, of kind of like using them as our future that we can look into and iterate on those pilot experiences and bring them back to the next set of pilots that we're doing. So we're piloting with a plan. We're focusing on team dynamics and what flexibility or work from anywhere program really feels like. Managing data streams is the really most important part of this, which is it's very data-driven company, but there's data coming from all sides. So what do you do with that? And then ground truthing the pilot. So I always say, like, even if you're a very large company, you can still talk to people. It doesn't have to be that you're talking to everyone, but going deep is as valuable as going broad. So working with, talking to the employees on those sites is very important, and we can gain a lot of insight. So the question for them is really, what is the purpose of the workplace? Why do we come back? Is it for business reasons? Is it for personal, individual enjoyment and team camaraderie? Or is it a mixture of all those things together? The first thing we did with this client is a space audit. I call it a Marie Kondo of your space types. So we did, what do you want to keep? What do you want to toss? What are things that you want to buy anew? And then built that up into a kit of possibilities and a new experience. So, moving those parts and pieces around and really understanding key adjacencies and the preference for space types that manifest the work style and the work mode that you're trying to accomplish. So this was all months ago when no one was in the office, building up a new idea and a new kit. And then saying, okay, let's go execute that. Let's go pilot. That's our hypothesis. That's our claim. And then working with what data do we think we're going to gather? A lot of data, I think like 11 streams of data. So really organizing what are the questions that data is answering for us, who's in charge of that information and what's the output, and then who's going to kind of take it from a data like soup and turn it into action. And so actually there's a person and a team now responsible for that. Also at the same time, working with teams to understand their team dynamics and understand their personalities and preference. So how do they find each other? And this is actually, once the pilot has started, we're now working with teams. So it feels backwards, but we didn't know any of these things starting, but we said, let's learn it as we go, because no one knows how they're going to behave until they start doing it. So as they're in the space for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, we're saying, how do you find each other? Like, how do you know where your team is? Because it's an unassigned environment. How do you have preference around what you sit near by or what resources you're near? And then what resources do you need in order to feel effective? And why are you coming in? You know, what's your jam? What's pushing you out of your house or pulling you in? And out of that, we built personas, and we continue to build individual and team personas of the sociables, the routiners, the creatives, and what their main statement is, their motivation, and what resources and space and technology needs they have. And the last is we ground truthing the pilot. And again, in motion, we're asking around these space types, what are the norms that you expect people to have that maybe aren't even clear? So we're understanding, you know, I thought I'd sit here and it would be quiet, but people started talking, and I don't feel like I have permission to tell them what to do. So it's looking at space and space affordance, which is this idea of space can tell you about its, you know, it has a kind of permission associated with it, proximity and privacy. And out of that, we're building a better communication campaign and visual campaign around really establishing, like, these are the norms expected of this space, which people tell us, even if you had this simple paper sign, it tells me that I can reinforce this sign and say, hey, can you be quiet? Because this says this is the study. And so people in human behavior need those slight nudges in order to feel like they have permission to speak on behalf of a norm and expectation. And another example is in reverse mode. Once people have been there for a while, we're learning really what is the purpose of the workplace in their experience, and building up these higher themes of why people come in, who that really is for, and then how can we improve on that experience. So we have different solution sets that could be an improvement to the pilot in play. We're upvoting those with employees, and we're telling the HR teams, the real estate and IT teams, this is what people need the most. They need it right now. In order for, you know, if we do anything else, they'll be really mad because they didn't get this like very basic need met. And mixing those insights and recommendations, and really acknowledging that, like, you cannot execute an idea in isolation. It has to be space, tech, and norms all at once for many of these themes. So the idea is it's a sandbox guide. We're testing one location, and then we're going to scale up to 4 more. And we're iterating on the pilot. So the pilot ran for 3 months. Now we're going to do a pilot 2.0, update, remove things that didn't work. And parallel to that, work with leaders and workplace service teams, who are the boots on ground teams, and change management. So really educating them on the why behind the what, so that they can also be leaders in this movement of change. So the next story I'm going to share is with Jeremy. Jeremy, I'll drive, but I really want to introduce Jeremy from Pangean. He and I have been working really closely on his product and how to align with future data, and rethinking what is the information that we gather, and really focusing on the human story. So I'm really excited that he's here to share this work and how to go deep with data and supercharge the work experience with his emerging product.
Great. Thanks so much, Liz. Did you want to introduce this slide, or do you want me to take over?
Sure, I can do that. Yeah. So Pangean is a 5-year-old startup, really working with cutting edge technology, sensor technology that can help map the human experience at work, in the workplace. It's gathering passive data over time. And it's really going beyond utilization and studying human behavior. So in the work that we're doing with clients, we're really making sure that there's an intention set with, like, what do you want to study? What is it you want to experiment with? Because right now is the time to start gathering that passive information, so that we can create a baseline and then move on that, you know, with some months of data gathered, and make decisions on that. How can we establish A/B sites so that we're looking at, like, different conditions, putting a little rigor behind it? How do we make sure that we're measuring what matters to the client? And how can we really look at the positives? So one of the things that the platform can do is study like the high range of activity and say, okay, what are the conditions that made that so, and create an insight recommendation engine around how can we manifest that and scale that moving forward. I'm gonna mute.
So just to reintroduce Pangean, it is an all-in-one workplace sensing platform that helps leadership really improve how people work in the office. And we like to look at lots of data. That's how we do this. And it's gathering the right information. And like Liz said, pre-pandemic, most companies were really interested in about utilization and how people, where they sat, how much space they took up. But post-pandemic, the story has changed significantly. We're looking now at what draws people back into the office. What will they be doing when they're there? And really taking that information and that human experience data and applying that to design and space layout. So we did a lot of work during 2020, really trying to get an understanding of really what people expect when they come back. And we all know this is very much an unknown. It's kind of the Wild West. But what we do know is people really want that human experience. We are tribal by nature, and we are lacking that community and that culture at home. We just don't get it between the webinars, the FaceTime over Zoom. We really want to experience the collaboration, connections, the community, and the recognition that we get when we're with our team and people and our managers. So Pangean really set out to develop a new sensor, and it's a multi-stack sensor that picks up multidimensional data. And that information, it's 100% anonymous, but what it's doing is it's picking up the human activities in the office. So we're no longer focusing on what they call butts and seats. We're looking at how people and teams move in that office, what happens when they're together, where those moments of random connections or collaboration happen, and really measuring how often that happens and putting that against what the space intent was in the beginning. And if those two things don't line up, it gives us a great indication that we need to bring in some change. So what you're seeing here is a general dashboard that we offer. And it shows the activity dynamics of people, and those little metrics on the side that the analytics are showing moments in time. And more importantly, the activities that are happening in those moments of time. We can now detect things like where heads down work is happening, maybe at a desk or a quiet part of the office, where random connections are happening on the floor plan, and pinpoint those things to tell you if the space surrounding that moment really encouraged a longer connection point or a collaborative moment. So our real goal here is to really enhance the space by looking beyond the seats, right? Looking at where people and teams come together, forming relationships, and really understanding if our space is providing the environment for them to do their best work. So here's a fun little clip that we have actually on our website, but what you're seeing here are some sample people running through the office. And again, this is similar to what we see in our site. It doesn't pick up individuals by personal identifiable information, but what it does show you is where a person or people connect around the office, how long those moments last for, what could potentially be supporting that connection. Is it a furniture system? Is it a social space? And really be able to decode that information and tell you if the office is truly supporting the behavior and work that people come in to do.
Last words, Jeremy?
Yeah, we talk about plan a lot. My favorite thing to challenge people with is don't think you can come into this post-pandemic world and execute perfectly. Put the infrastructure in place and measure and test what's going on, because I guarantee you people are weird and we're going to do things you don't expect. And what we have to be is nimble and be very much a whole team focused on responding and reacting to those moments that we're unexpecting, right? So I think getting the data in the right place, getting your team and your plan in place, and being able to observe and move quickly to make make those positive changes.
Thank you so much. I think this is a great way to supercharge the data that you collect and focus on human dynamics and activities. And again, sort of say and balance what people are saying versus what people are doing. So the thing that I love about this is the introduction of mixed methods, especially for an HR team who's really often leaning on surveys and self-reporting. And this is a passive reporting that can complement the self-reporting and say, okay, like this is the same story, or we have a kind of disconnect of what people are doing and what we think the purpose of this work experience is. So just tips and takeaways, and I know we're coming up on the hour. So the first is the idea of like, we need to start pedaling. So it's easier to act your way into thinking differently versus think your way into acting differently. And if you've ever tried to ride a bike, if you're sitting there and not pedaling, you're going to fall over. So movement and momentum is really important. And I love this little, this is a kind of a Twitter post and a cartoon of the CFO saying to the CEO, what if we invest in our employees and they leave anyway? And the CEO says like, well, what if we don't and they stay? So the risk of doing nothing is that you have a lot of disgruntled employees who maybe are less motivated because they feel like you're not responding to the needs that I have. Even if you don't do something, acknowledge that you heard me. And I think that's really important. So have a plan. It's everything we talked about today can help you create a plan, have a learning goal, have a hypothesis, have a claim, and then test it. And then if you were wrong, admit that and pivot. Establish an infrastructure to create information, establish new metrics, challenge yourself to say, let's not just measure the same stuff we had before, but let's look at new ways of gathering data. Celebrate the wins, communicate those to your employees and your teams, and continue to build on the pain points. And, and again, are people saying what we're seeing, and do we have a method of follow-up? Guide the change, so important to do change enablement and change management. There's all different methods, but I think it's really that idea of building awareness, educating people, making ideas stick, building consensus, including people in the process. So change, I always say, starts with the first conversation you have about the project and continues on through. So even if you don't recognize you're doing change management, you are, but you might just be doing it poorly. And then measure that success. So triangulate the methods and look at the data together. What are the occupancy rates? So that's a very basic thing. Who's showing up, or how are we showing up together virtually or in person? What is the effectiveness of those experiences that we're building? And then are people happy? Are they satisfied? And how are you measuring that? So thank you so much. I'm excited to hear about what you think from this talk that you could start doing tomorrow and testing. And let me know now on the chat or through LinkedIn. And I really appreciate the time today. Back to you, Mia.
Thank you so much, Liz and Jeremy, to share it's really great presentations from you guys. And there's a lot of lessons that I can learn and also that I can apply, especially for tomorrow, because your questions is what will you start doing tomorrow? Okay, so I wrote many things here. So we could come to the Q&A section. And if you have any questions, please feel free to submit in Zoom. And we also have questions that the registrants submit before. One of that is, what are key metrics to measure employee engagement? Is from Hui, HRBP from Shopee. Liz?
Yeah, what to measure for employee engagement. So what I see a lot of HR people doing, and the HR real estate teams are, measuring tons and tons of surveys on different aspects of the work experience and expectations of returning to work. So I think that's, again, self-reporting is a good place to start. But I think, and that can be kind of considered a scale data search or data set, and then going deep. So following that up with focus groups, and building that sentiment and that feeling. And so you're going in both directions, and you have the kind of human experience and pulling insights out of those conversations and common themes, as well as kind of the statistical data of a survey. So I think those are two really good ways to start. And then also, following that up with emerging technologies like Jeremy's company, which is, can you have passive data as people return to work? So you can imagine, even in a Dreamplex, putting those sensors in common spaces and looking how people aggregate and flock, and the dynamics of activity over a day could tell you like how people are behaving in that space, and how they're like appreciating it through their body language and activity, and how you can even rearrange furniture if you're like, no one ever sits over there. Maybe we can try something different. So I would say, the two basics, and then the third would be any kind of emerging technology that you want to play with.
Okay. So another question that's related to the data as well is that, like, what index or indicators should be presented to get the buy-in from line managers and make them play an ambassador role in driving new experience at work? This is from Vivian.
Yeah. I think first of all, it's the idea of just showing and sharing the information. So Jeremy and I talk a lot about data democracy, and the idea that data is for everyone. It shouldn't be held in the hands of decision makers and leaders alone, and that presented correctly, everyone can learn from the information. And so part of it is not just sharing one way, but sharing in a way that's a conversation and saying, here's what we think we're seeing. What do you make of this? So ask these line managers and middle managers to join in on the conversation and help interpret the information. Could be a nice way of saying, like, we're not showing this to you because we think you're doing it wrong, but we just want to understand what do we think is going on here.
Okay. It looks like many people are curious about the hot desk, because I receive a lot of questions about that. So it's from Jenny, Information Governance, and also from Kate from Unilever. Is that, do hot desk booking system work?
Yes, I love this question because I just went through this with a client. They tried to implement a hot desking booking system for every desk in the work environment, and this is in Australia. And what they found is when you can book a specific desk, it creates a lot of tension that's undesirable, because naturally teams want to flock towards each other. You want to sit next to your peer, next to your colleague. But when you're in a booking team, a desk booking system, it's like every man for themselves or every woman for themselves, and you can't see who you're booking next to. So it distributes teams in an unproductive way. So the rethink of that is like, either get rid of it or think more like desk booking, like WeWork, which is where I used to work. We had a flock of hot desks, like let's say 24 desks, and we had 24 bookings for the day. So you book a spot, but when you arrive, you can sit in any one of the 24 seats, because you may have booked with someone else and you want to sit next to each other. And so you can kind of, you can figure that out on site. But on a system that's saying you sit here and you sit here, and it's like, but we wanted to sit together. So it's kind of combining the reliability of a booking system, which a lot of people want, but with the play of like human connection and serendipity that you want to create when people want to come together. So I think but also in Jeremy's world, the idea is like, get the sensors in first, study the human behavior, and then introduce the booking system once you kind of know what people are doing naturally, is another way to think about it.
Okay, great. So there's another question, which is quite difficult. So you can also involve Jeremy if you want. Is that what are the specific insights of employee in this pandemic time, and what are the top 3 problems we should tackle the most in the workplace to enhance employee development, engagement, and suggestions?
Yeah. So I touched on a couple of these, but the first is the sense of belonging, and that this place was made for me. So recently I was in a workshop where the employee said, you know, I told the manager there aren't enough private rooms for me to have a conversation when I come in, and it's really hard for me to do my work. And the manager said, okay, then you can just work from home from now on. And he was trying to be understanding, but what the person heard was, okay, the place we built isn't for you, so why don't you go work somewhere else? So it's being really, really sensitive to like what we're doing, what we're saying, and making sure that when people walk in, there are signals the space sends that say, this was built for you and we're trying to make your day easier. So really basic things like, are there enough places to have enclosed conversations? A lot of people are complaining about that, those that can return to work, because in a home environment, maybe we could go anywhere. It was our closet or the basement, you know, or wherever to have a conversation. We want to have that reliability when we return to work. We want to have the basics, the user experience of universal hookups. So we want to pop into any location, plug and play. A lot of times that's not happening. So that kind of like ease of transitioning back. But I think the third is we want to kind of in this human connection and human feeling, like we want to be heard. We want to be able to continue to open up and be our honest and authentic selves. But we also want to make sure that we have an equal space at the table. So even if I'm working remotely, do I get the banter before and after the meeting? And I've had clients play around with the idea of like, let's start every meeting 5 minutes late, so that because we can always, everyone always comes late anyway. So why don't we make the first 5 minutes like ease in, and you can have chatter and like casual conversations, which is what a lot of remote people miss when they're not in person, is the banter before and after the meeting. So how can you design that in, but also just like supportive technology, so we feel like we're in equal space and kind of equal face time within a hybrid meeting. So equity, belonging, and reliability, I would say, are the three universal themes that I hear a lot about.
So we are now running out of time, but I will throw the last questions to Dan, because he's begging me that he has a really good question for you.
Okay.
Now I feel like super on the spot. I have to deliver not only the last question, but also a super good question. That's pretty tough. Well, first of all, I mean, both Jeremy and Liz, like, huge thank you for sharing today. Liz, I thought the story of evolution was so interesting. And I think that a lot of the people that we talk to, and I'm sure a lot of the people on the webinar tonight, kind of find themselves in this battle of being either on the people side or on the finance side. And so my question is, where does that story usually start? Does it typically come more from the business side of an organization that then has to pull in the people side, or does it typically come more from the people side and they then have to pull in the business side?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I would say it's maybe a groundswell. Probably both teams are talking about it. Maybe, you know, a moment of change. And a lot of these conversations only start with some moment, right? Like a pandemic, or a new office space, or a decision, you know, an end of lease. Like, what should we do? And so I think both, there's like chatter inside the groups, and then I mean, I'm usually on the HR or real estate side, and bringing up these, like, this is what we're hearing. And, you know, are we going to support these needs? And so, and then I think the teams that are risk adverse say, well, why should we change? Prove to me that we need to do anything differently when we just don't return to old habits. And then it's this journey of empathy, storytelling, supporting with evidence and data. So I would say, in my mind, the push to change is often HR saying, like, we're listening and we're learning, and we really need to respond in a new way. Can we have your support?
Right, and so in that you're really acting as a partner to them to kind of like help them not only think through for themselves, but also take that entire organization on a big journey.
Yeah, and I think it's that, you know, people with holding the money bags, they're not the villains. They're just saying like, build me the business case. I want to know that this is a good investment. And so that's their job and that's their mindset. And so, and it makes everyone, you know, be more thoughtful and put their MBA hats on and say like, okay, here's my argument for the thing that we want to do. It'll make you know, and say like, we're going to do it. And then we're going to follow it up with like continued study. We're going to track the information to see, was it a success? And that's what a pilot is so great about, is like, hey, we all agree, we don't know. So let's do this in a very small way. And then if it's successful, we can scale up. And we can continue to kind of, you know, get pulse and feedback from the work culture to make sure that like this was a success, like financially, but also culturally, which in the end relates to the bottom line as well. Like, do people want to work there? And HR can make all sorts of data arguments around turnover and salary and, you know, leadership, and business can say whether or not they're doing well in the market. So I think everyone's sort of looking at the same information, but kind of with different goggles on.
Makes total sense. I think we talk a lot about the fact that companies are nothing but a group of people. So I think, you know, your argument also, and that calculation you showed in terms of, you know, you're investing in their salary, you're getting those people in, you know, why not get the most out of them, right? And I think there's a lot of like really nice notes throughout the webinar, both from you and from Jeremy, about the fact that it's really not about individual people, but it's people in teams. And
Yes.
that idea of like, you don't book a desk, you book a desk within a zone where you know you're going to find people that you want to work with.
Yes.
Like that makes it a lot more human than just talking about kind of these like data platforms and stuff like that. So I know that you have a day to start, and especially Jeremy, who joined even earlier, also will have a day to start. I think everyone here is excited to get to bed probably pretty soon.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Again, Liz, huge thank you. Jeremy, huge thank you. I think this was super, super insightful. Even though offices here have remained mostly open during the pandemic, I think there are a lot of questions kind of coming up now that the rest of the world is talking about workplace transformation, and you know, what can be our role within that, and kind of like how can companies embrace that. So I think this is really, really inspiring, and I like that it's not just theory, it's a lot of like tangible ideas. And so I think everyone can start tomorrow embracing some of those. So thank you, Liz and Jeremy, again for presenting. Thank you, Mia, for co-hosting, and thank you everyone for joining tonight. Really great pleasure, and we will be back next month with another global expert. I think he was on today a little bit as well, Daniel Stillman, who is a design strategist and focuses very much on conversation design. So if you want to learn how to have difficult conversation and good conversations, that would be a great one to join next month.
I highly recommend it. Daniel is a good friend, great conversation designer, and really the core of a lot of the work I do too, which is like, how do you talk to people about what's happening? So a good compliment to this talk.
Yeah, there you go. So you get an endorsement for that one too.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Unpaid endorsement. Yes. Okay. Bye. Have a good evening.
Bye, everybody.
Good night.